Hi everybody, it's Josh with Talk About Trek, and we are back today with another TNG novel. As you can see, we've just finished up The Chains of Command, the new novel by Bill McKay and Eloise Flood. So from the front here, Commander Riker must either give up the USS Enterprise or sacrifice his captain's life. And then let's read the back together. And again, I always advocate don't read the back. If you're going to read the book, don't spoil yourself. There are some big spoilers in here. But anyway, Star Trek, The Next Generation, Chains of Command. While exploring a group of devastated Class M planets in a remote sector of space, the crew of the USS Enterprise is shocked to discover a group of human slaves on a forbidding glacial world. When the slaves revolt against their human overseers, Captain Picard and his crew sympathize with the slaves' plight, but cannot interfere in the conflict. After the revolt is a success, Captain Picard learns that both the slaves and the overseers were controlled by a mysterious bird-like race called the Sikh, who are coming to reclaim their property. With time running out, the rebels kidnap Captain Picard and Counselor Troy, drawing the USS Enterprise into the middle of their deadly plan of vengeance. See, I'm just going to point out, if you didn't know that was going to happen, it's funner in the book. Just my opinion. So, I had no idea they were going to get kidnapped. If I had read the back, that would have been given up. So, let's jump right into The Chains of Command by Bill McCoy and Eloise Flood. Bill McKay and Eloise Flood. This was published in 1992 and had an interesting, kind of interesting story about how it came about. Bill apparently worked in the publishing industry and was asked by David Stern to write a Trek novel. Kind of back in those days, I guess everybody kind of worked and knew each other pretty well. He was interested in doing it, but didn't know a lot about Trek. But luckily, his office mate, Eloise, did, and she watched TNG. So between the two of them, they kind of spitballed some ideas, and eventually came up with the story that they wrote here today. And his comment was that in the book, probably the parts where there's action and maybe a chase, something like that, that was mostly him. And when the characters are doing something good and humane, that was probably Eloise's writing there. So, jumping into the book, what do we have? The Enterprise is on like a survey mission at this point. Pretty interesting. They are surveying these M-class planets that have all been devastated. Tens of thousands of years ago by their reckoning. So they've all been devastated. The first one they visit, the atmosphere is... something is dangerous in the atmosphere. So they beam down with their suits on, and it kind of starts off with a bit of a horror kick, because one of the young crewmen decides, unfortunately, to remove her helmet before they've fully tested the air, and the air melts her face and melts her whole body down to nothing. So that's how the book starts. And you're like, whoa! So it's kind of some really dark imagery for the first chapter in this Trek book, but it kind of sets the tone for what's going on with these worlds. So that's the first world. The other worlds that they look at, the next one they get to, is basically it looks like it's been hit by a giant asteroid, and the world has this huge rift in the side of it, miles and miles and miles across, this giant chasm that you can see from space. So sometime in the past they kind of theorized that something struck this planet with such force that it wiped out all the civilization and left that big scar in the planet. But when they get to this planet, they are surprised that it is inhabited, and they receive a transmission from somebody who is basically very surprised to see humans in command of their own ship. And they describe him as kind of a sallow, like a fat face looking guy, and before you know it, there's a bunch of commotion in the background, and this guy gets shot. And what's going on is a slave revolt. So these people on this planet here it's a group of slave humans, and then they're like these overseer humans that watch over them. And once the slave humans actually saw that there are free humans out there, they began the revolt, which is something they've probably been planning to do for a while anyway. That might be a little loud. I'm going to crank it down a little bit. That's probably a little bit better. Okay. So they plan their revolt, or they have their revolt, and then this is when the away team beams down for the first time. You get to meet the characters here. So the planet is called Korn, Koorn, and the leader of this new group of rebel slaves, his name is Koban. So Riker goes down, he meets Koban. They kind of beam down right into the middle of the revolution, and kind of unwittingly or become part of it. So they beam down right into the middle of this fight between the overseers and the slaves that are revolting. So the overseers are kind of soundly beaten and rounded off. Maybe like a couple of them escape, and they manage to capture the main overseer, who is Volstead. And they've also managed to capture the regent. So each of these kind of slave planets has a regent Sikh who is there to watch over everything. So here's where you get to kind of learn more about the Sikh, which kind of for me in the beginning of the book I thought was funny, and it did make me laugh. The slaves describe them as chickens, so that's kind of the picture that I got in my head. But they're an avian race, short in stature, and they do have wings that end in fingers, so they don't actually fly. But they've captured the regent, and the regent's name is Drach. And the way it's spelled is Draagh. And every time I read it, I pronounced it in my head like I was a chicken saying it. So that's what was making me laugh, mainly because all of the language and the names for this race of the Sikh all kind of sound like how like a chicken would talk. So when I was first started reading that, I'm like, this is going to be a silly book, isn't it? This is going to be very silly. But in the end, it turned out that it wasn't silly. It was a very deep and very well done moral story. So very good. But I digress. So the away team is down. They're talking to Koban. They've met Volstead and they've met Drach. And then now this race of the Sikh, they do have this ability to put off a pheromone, which is basically like a terrible smell, which kind of confuses everybody and kind of throws you into a stupor. And that's like their kind of natural defense. But right now, he's captured, or she's captured, Volstead is captured, and the slaves have control of this planet. And this is where you kind of get your little exposition dump about what is actually going on here. So the Sikh are this ancient race of, like I said, avian people who used to be a much larger population. They controlled many systems, or many like planets in this system, but there was a huge war between 4 different factions. And the resulting war is what the Enterprise crew saw with the planet. They had the awful atmosphere, and then this planet with the giant rift tore in it. And the Sikh basically were all wiped out except for like one planet. So they became very, very focused on making sure that no Sikh died. So they don't do any like hard labor or anything like that, and they're just focused on their population growing back to its once the glory that it once had. But they're going about that the wrong way. So the humans are actually refugees from the eugenics war, and they were escaping from Earth during that time. Basically, thought that the Earth was done for, and that they were the last vestiges of humanity. They were sucked into some sort of wormhole, of course, and flung to the other side of the galaxy, as happens in Star Trek, and that's how they ended up way out there. They formed, they landed, they formed a colony. The system that they had put in place on the colony was not the best, because they were basically just engineers, and they didn't really have a good system of leadership, so that when they were discovered by these Sikh, the Sikh kind of saw how they were living and really thought of them as kind of like lower life forms, and then brought them into servitude. So for hundreds of years, they've been basically like this slave race for the Sikh, who send them out on these missions, these 5-year missions, to terraform planets to make them habitable for the Sikh again. So you get kind of all that in those next couple of chapters. And it's a book that makes you kind of shift who you think is good and who you think is bad, folks. focus. There we go. Which is kind of interesting. So of course you come in right away. You're siding with the revolting slaves. You definitely have to take their side right away. But then you get to hear the story of Volstead, who's an overseer, and then it makes you kind of sympathize with him because he was raised, from birth basically to be this overseer to watch over these slaves, and he was actually like on the home world of the Sikh. So he's got this kind of this knowledge and the kind of love of their culture as well as human culture. So he's kind of like the bridge between the two. So it kind of makes you, I guess, look at him in a different light as not just being a slave master, but more and trying to do more for his people. So they do kind of lead you, drop you a few clues every now and then here that maybe Koban is up to something more than just what he's telling Picard and everybody else, and he's actually planning something. So you're about in the middle of the book here, and we're just ranting. This is a rant alert because we are kind of going off the rails here, but that's fine because that's what we do here on this channel. Just checking my notes. Chicken minutes. Okay, so here's where the book kind of the ride into the action starts here. So they're having a discussion with the kind of everybody's together in like the base that the Enterprise has made there on the planet, and then all of a sudden they're overpowered by this terrible stink, and it turns out that they've had one of the rebel children was convinced to smuggle in like 2 vials of this stuff, and it knocks everybody out. And then the slaves, or the revolting slaves, they come up, they kidnap Picard and Troy while everyone else is knocked out by the stink. Drock helps kind of bring everybody back, Riker and everybody else that's still there, and at that point kind of becomes a good person in the story. So it's like I said, it just switches on its head so much. But basically the plan that Koban has is he's going to kidnap Picard and Troy, and through them and through their leverage, he's going to convince Riker to let him take over the ship so he can take his ward to the Sikh. That's his idea. He basically wants to destroy them, and he's going to go after them with the Enterprise. So not a great plan, but he does have Picard and Troy. And then here's where you get maybe the action part that maybe Bill had more of a hand in, as we were talking about earlier. So 6 of the rebels and Picard and Troy set off on this long journey to somewhere where they can kind of keep them hidden and safe and away from scanner range and transporter range. And it's down in the bottom of that big rift. Here's the planet, and there's the rift, and they're going to climb down in there, and that's and it's freezing there too. This is like an Arctic planet, so they kind of adds a little bit of an extra layer. But the journey through chapters 10 through maybe 15, 16 is all kind of them journeying down in here while the Enterprise is trying to find a way to scramble to find them. So it is a fun ride to the finish, though, I have to say. It kind of reminded me of reading like Edgar Rice Burroughs, because what happens is they have talked about other ice creatures on this planet. They kind of dropped some hints before, but everything goes wrong for them as they're heading down into this rift. All but one of the rebels gets killed by arrows, and they don't really show who's doing it yet, but just basically they know they're being hunted, and they're down to just Counselor Troy, Captain Picard, and then one of these rebels. And they know that at this point they're caught. They can't go any further ahead into these caves they were trying to get to, and they're being followed from behind. So Captain Picard, doing the right thing, of course, instead of trying to go out fighting like an idiot like this guy wants to do, he surrenders, and they're actually led deep and further into these caves and discover that there's a whole race of these creatures, and they're not ice beasts, but they're actually like another avian race. And they have great like old technology they can tell that they had from like a time before, but they don't really know how to do anything with it now. They don't have the knowledge to fix it. So that's one of the reasons that they took them alive, is because they know that they have the knowledge to help fix what they need fixed, which is like a big geothermal heat tap so that they can keep on heating their colony and keep on surviving. So they make a deal. They're able to kind of work out a way to translate languages, and they're able to talk, make a deal, and they agree to help fix the tap in exchange for their freedom. See, this book is weird. It goes all over the place, but it's fun. And I'm going all over the place, but that's fun too. But they agree to fix the tap in exchange for their freedom. Troy has to stay there in their little base while Picard and the rebel leader, or not the leader, but he's like the second. His name is Chew. I should just say his name. Chew. His name is Chew. So Picard and Chew go with some of these other avians to go get parts. That's when they make their move. Picard realizes, or Troy realizes, that they're not ever going to let them go. Because they know where they're at. So they have to make a move. He makes a move to get some communication equipment that was down in this crashed flyer on the bottom of a chasm, so he has to climb down and get that. They're able to get that as soon as they get the communication stuff turned on. I mean, these guys are like closing it on right then and there. They're able to, as soon as they turn it on, basically, Commander Riker's there because he's been monitoring all the communications. Worf and his security crew beam right down to the location, and they're able to, stun the guys and beam everybody back up. So that's kind of like your happy ending. And then through the knowledge of basically what was in there, the geothermal tap and all that, they're able to use the sensors to finally locate them, and then they just beam down and get Counselor Troy and beam her right out of there. So yeah, happy ending, right? Diplomatic ending. But it gets deeper. So it's not just another race of avians that's down there. This is the remnants of the race that was nearly destroyed when someone flung a giant asteroid at them. So back when the Tseek were warring between themselves, they thought that they had totally destroyed this race of the Tseek, which they called like the... I made a note. We're going to call them the Cracks. Cracks, Zeke. Cracks, Zeke. Yeah, like that. So, in the end, basically what they do is because the original Zeke, they come to the planet because they know of the slave revolt. So they're there, and they're threatening to destroy the Enterprise and also basically cleanse the planet, destroy everyone there. So they convince them, by showing them, that their other race is not dead. And because of their self-preservation, everything works out fine. But does it really? I did enjoy this book, but one of the things I thought was weird in the end is how in the world are they really going to deal with the issue of an entire slave race, of hundreds of years, a race of humans that's been bred to be slave terraformers. But in the end, they kind of gloss over that they're going to go back and like the humans will be freed, and they're going to figure out a way to kind of integrate them into the society. But it kind of makes me want to like have like a follow up. Like I would like to know how that actually went, because it seems like there would be so much animosity for being being slaves, being basically a slave race for all of their known life, that it would be too hard to ever integrate back into the society with their masters. So I don't know how they're going to get there, but the book was fun. I will say that much. The book was very fun. I kind of liked how in the end it just took a turn for like a action adventure chase. So at first you had kind of this little mystery, and you had little twists and turns about who's really the bad guy here, and maybe they're all bad guys, who knows. But then you kind of, to the end, they give you a nice little chase with some bow and arrow and rock climbing adventure and that kind of fun stuff. So I would have to say I had a good time with Star Trek, The Chains of Command. And where are we going to go next? I think we're just going to keep on with the TNG, because I see that next is number 22, In Balance. And just having fun with these, so we're going to plow right along. Lots more going on here in the Star Trek world, and to talk about Star Trek Day coming up on the 8th. New Lower Decks out, which is so good. And Captain Kirk is going to be arriving today. Captain Kirk coming here. A little Kirk, not a big Kirk. Little Kirk. But anyway, we'll be talking about that later too. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. As always, live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time. Bye.